To begin with, let me tell you that the title of the lesson tonight really goes back and ties in with last week, but it's called The Hidden Light, Mastering the Art of Creation. Now, if you were to create a universe, I think the first thing you would need to master is what's called Zim Zoom. Zim Zoom is just a way God presents his apparent absence. Now, by that I mean the fact that God never disappears, nor does he ever leave us or forsake us, but he does not appear to us, not easily found. So, as we're going through this understanding, Zim Zoom literally means to reduce or to contract. Now, last week we talked about the fact that there was this contraction that occurred, and it was a perfect circle. And this perfect circle represented the space that God allowed for us and creation to occur in. For a Kabbalist, a Zimzum is just simply a reduction in divine energy, energy that is used to create the worlds and to keep the worlds in motion. Something, it's something like a transformer in the fact that it reduces this energy, this electrical current that leaves a turbine coming to our house. And it's not arriving until it has been stepped down enough that our house and our light bulbs and all of the things can handle all the electricity or all the energy that's created. Zimzoom is also like turning down the amplification of a quality stereo speaker. So if you have a good speaker, none of the signals is lost, just that much of it has becomes inaudible to our ears. So too, the more Zimzoom is applied, the less the resulting world will be able to hear or see the divine energy, which is creating and sustaining it. Distortions and corruptions in the light can also occur. And so that's what we're going to be talking about is this idea of Zimzoom. And again, it all ties back to pi. Remind yourself, God, when he created the Torah, he created not only letters, but the letters were numbers. He created not only numbers, but he created words, and the words had value. So we're going to talk about that value. But the interesting thing is that this value of each of these words really goes back to pi, 3.14 on and into infinity. Kabbalists describe innumerable such zimzoom. In fact, the word zimzoom is really a plural, meaning that God has generated innumerable number of worlds. Our world, well, in which we live, is the final stop. Some say that the other worlds are the worlds above us, which is the world of uh, uh, Atzilut, or the world of Beriah, or the world of Yetzirah. And we live in the fourth world, which is the world of action, the world that we're a part of. Zimzoom is the way God makes space for us to have our own world. Now, he hides the light from us because you remember in the beginning, God created Genesis chapter 1, those first three verses. Genesis created light, or God created the light. The light itself then illuminated our world for the first few days. And then he hid that light and replaced it with what we call the sun, the moon, and the stars. So this light that he's talking about is not the light that you and I see every day. Now, in the process, God has hidden himself from us so that we might make our own choices. Because if we knew he was here, it's like driving your car down a road next to a police officer. You know you're not going to go faster than the officer goes. It's a constant reminder of what's going on around you. Well, it's in that same way that uh, God takes and hides his presence. And in doing so, it allows us freedom. It allows us choice. Zimzum is also how God makes space for us to understand him. Because you see, we require an curiosity in order to move forward. The primordial contraction, the first one, the Zimzum. In fact, all of this that I'm talking to you about comes from the Arazal through his student. And the book that he wrote from all of this is a book called Etz Haim, The Tree of Life. And this, what I'm talking to you about, is chapter 1. It's the beginnings and the basics of understanding what I would call Kabbalah. Without the Zimzum, creation would be obliterated by God's presence. No two things can occupy the same space at the same time, except in the case of God. So the gematria of the word Zimzum is 278, which is also the gematria of another word. The word that I'm thinking of is the word called Haron. Let me see if I can find that and share it with you. Yeah, here it is. Share. Here we go. Zimzum. To contract. Now, I wrote the word for you. And if you look at the word, you'll notice it's a sadi, a yud, a mem, a sadi, a vav, and a final mem. My wife was talking to me tonight, reminding me that I haven't shared with you the understanding or a chart so that you had the copy of the letters. There are numerous numbers of charts on the web. If you go to Chabad.org, you will find, by just simply typing in Hebrew alphabet, you'll receive plenty of locations in which they are and definitions, explanations for each and every one. So anyway, back to the story. So Zimzum is to contract, and it's a value of 264. The word Haron, pregnant, also has a value of 274. As I created my notes, I decided to leave some of my notes on here so that you have, well, most of us can understand what we hear and understand what we see, but we do better when we have both sight and sound to work with. And so at points in time, I'm going to give you both. Here it says the gematria of Genesis 1:1 is 2701. That's from the center point to the edge of this vacated space. Now, the radius then is from 1354, which is known as Torah of God. Now, from that point outward at the halfway point is what they call a second radius. And that second radius has a value of 676. Again, just numbers at this point. But if you take the number 676 and you square that number, you find out that you have 26 squared. 26 being equal to the name of the great one, Havaya, God. God has been in the center of his creation and throughout from the very beginning. Now, amazingly, if I multiply the number 1351, that first radius times the second radius, 676, my total will be 913,276. Interesting numbers. Now, I didn't figure this out. This was figured out by the sages. 913, if you look at the first three numbers, is the value of Bereshit. 276 is the value of Zimzum. So I don't think it was a coincidence that God used specific language that gave us specific numbers to help us understand what's going on. That, to me, is an impressive understanding of where we're going. Now, in the course of time, who would expect to see these numbers that are seemingly unrelated become together to create something so special? Now, according to the Kabbalah, creation began as what they call a nekuda emtzet, which is a midpoint. In other words, God was in the middle of this as he expands out this emptiness. That's the concept that we're trying to get across. Now, in doing so, this whole idea is, as we look at it, and I don't know if you can you see, well, I haven't put up the new numbers, but let me go back and let's put the new numbers up. Sages teach then that 2701 hints at 270 pregnancy. Well, how can 2701 hint about pregnancy? Well, you see the zero? The zero inside the number is seen as a bloated zero. It's like a woman, the farther along she gets in her pregnancy, the greater the zero appears. And so the first verse of Genesis is really the crown of his 10 sayings used to explain creation. That first verse contains everything within it. It is pregnant with all of the other items that we're going to read about in the Torah. Everything is included in that first verse. Creation began as the nekuda emtzait, the midpoint, which expands out in that perfect circle. Now, here comes the key point. The Hebrew word for point is nekuda, which has a gematria of 160. Again, 160 can be identified also as 15 times 11. Again, doesn't make much sense except by chance 15 can be made with a yud and a hey. The yud has a value of 10. Excuse me. The hey has a value of 5. 15. Now, if you go on, you find that the next one is 11. 11 is the value of a 6 and a 5. Vav is 6. Hey is 5. So if I looked at this together again, I now have for myself Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, the primal name of God. God is in the mathematics of the Torah. I want to get to pi. Pi is a digit number God used to bring about Zimzum in complete and the whole way from Hashem Ahad, God is one, in order for creation. I'm not going to write the whole number, but what I've written for you is a key section of that numbers because I'm writing the number that's at the 276th place of the prime of the number pi. Actually, I started a little earlier. I colored it for you to try to make it easier for you to see what I've seen and what I'm writing for you. Zimzum is 276. If you look, you can see the red number is 276. That number again, as we're looking at this, now remember, this is 3,796 places in. 3,000. Again, pi is an infinite number. It never ends. And so God has taken within pi and inserted in it what we would call creation. And he can pull from that, and we can pull from that words that fit our understanding of what has happened. Now, if you were a sage, like an Arazal or Vilna Gaon or one of those, your understanding is even far deeper than this. You would have taken 276 and run with it. But anyway, so I began with these 3 digits. Now, amazingly, if you look at the 3 digits in front of 276, They're in green. Do you see the word? The word is Bereshit. So amazing. It's 913 appears before the number 276. So Bereshit, after that word, we begin the Zim Zoom. Okay. Now it appears from 276, but take a look at this. 1351, these are the two radiuses we were using. 1351 and 676 equals 913,276. Now, the location for this, again, 3796, can be turned into a math problem. 2 times 26 times 73. The two in Hebrew is the number for the word house. 26, we've talked about before, that's the tetragrammaton. That's the holy name of God. And 73 is what we would call Hokmah, or divine wisdom. So in the number here, we're talking about the wisdom of God and the building of a house. It's also, bet also is the word for two. The world is built on two. Male, female, black, white. Well, you get the idea. You can go on and on and on with just understanding those. Now, everything in the universe reflects this bottomless divine wisdom. Now, next, observe this. Observe those numbers that come from 913. Well, actually come before 913. And I gave you a list there in blue for you to look at. Now, I want you to take it apart. First one is 37, then it's 441, then it's 704. If I look at it again, wisdom has another word which has a value of 37. The word truth is the word emet. It has a value of 441. And Shabbat, Sabbath, has a value of 702. Do you see how God has built into this system words that describe what it is that he is building for us, how he is putting it together mathematically? Now let me go to the first line of the Torah. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ba'et ha'oretz. Now I took in this and created for you and us hopefully a better understanding. I wrote the Hebrew letters last week, if you remember, and I gave you the the first letter. And that first letter was used and created a number value. The number value, well, if we continue down, Bet from Bereshit, Bet from Bara, Aleph from Elohim, Aleph from Et, Hey from Hashemayim, Vav from Vayet, Hey from Haaretz, which as a number problem would be 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 5 plus 6 plus 5, or 220 or 23 or 22. 22. Dividing 22, the value of the first letters, by the number of words in there, guess what you get? 3.14285, 99.96% of the value of pi. Coincidence? Accident? What the sages found in mapping out mathematically all the other verses of the Torah are that there is no other verse with the ratio of 22:7. It's the only verse in the Bible that has that ratio. Whether we look at the first letters of each word or the last letters of each word and divide it out, nothing changes. This sentence is alone. It is the only one of its kind. Now remember, every word has a number value. Every sentence has a number of words in it. They have worked through every sentence in this scripture. Imagine the painstaking effort that they would have gone through in order to get this to happen. Just imagine how much energy was required. Of course, they didn't have computers and they didn't have anything else to get in their way. They just simply knew what they were doing. And that's what's going on. Now, as we go through this, we find out that there's something else that's interesting in this first sentence. It is not easy to see, but if you take the last letter of the first three words, which is Bereshit, Bara, Elohim, and I did it in green so you can see those three letters, and you permutate. Now, permutation is a Jewish understanding, a way of looking at words and mixing and matching and seeing commonality in words that don't appear to have any relationship to one another. When we permutate those three letters together, which was Tav, Aleph, and Mem, we can create for ourselves the word Emet, which is, again, Aleph, Mem, Tav. So in other words, they took the first letter, and made it the third letter. And then again, they have the first letter and the second letter. So the word is Emet, which means truth. Truth. So God in the very beginning says what you're going to read is truth. Imagine that. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Let me reconfigure this little and set the radius first, 676, and then the diameter 1351. Now, if we make it a single number, it would look like this: 676,000. Well, did I put an extra number in there? No. Try it again. 6,706,13. 6,761,315, or one, excuse me. With me so far, I really do hope, since I'm seemingly stuttering tonight, let us move this number from the thousands to simple digits. So in other words, 6 million becomes 6. 761,000 becomes 761. 358 or 351 is still the same. But if I add all those numbers together, I get the number 1118. Well, 1118 is the value of a sentence, a rather important sentence, according to everyone. Hear, O Israel, Hashem, the Lord, is our God. Hashem is one. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Now you see the mathematical secrets that was right under our nose, that if you and I could read Hebrew, we would have already understood this. But even if you could read Hebrew, that does not mean you would have gone this deep. To even be here tonight means you are curious about God and what he has hidden away in his book. He goes on to say, now you can see that the mathematical secret that was right under your nose. Mathematically, I can also say 1,118 equals 13 times 86. 13 is the number for Ahava, just like it's also the number for Ehad. It's one, but Ahava means love. The next word is 86, which can also mean nature, but nature is Elohim. Nature is God. So our number then is Elohim Ehad, meaning God is one, God is nature, God is love. All of that in mathematical form, all of that coming from three letters. goes on. A little more math. 118 or 1,118 would be equal to 2 times 13 times 43, which are all prime factors of 26. 26 again is God's sacred name. We call it the Tetragrammaton. 2 times 42 equals 86. Thus, 1,118 is the first number which is divisible by both 24 and 86. And this teaches that God is both God and he's also Elohim. We can't make a trinity out of the Torah. We can't do it. All we can do is follow the math, follow the words. Now, there may be words like ruach, which gives us the idea of a spirit, which in Christianity they've turned into a Holy Spirit. That's not what it's actually said. So as we're going through this, understand there is only one God, and he is. Bereshit. This one word also has a value of 13 in small numbers. And literally the word means in the beginning of. Now we just write in the beginning. We leave that 2-letter word out. And why do we leave it out? Because we don't know what to do with it. It doesn't make sense. In the beginning of God, in the beginning of God, in the beginning of God created the heavens and the earth of. So now let me ask you, in the beginning of what? It doesn't say, because this is the beginning of the beginnings. That's what's going on. Now, if this is the beginning of the beginnings, what does that tell us? There's more than one beginning. When our Christian creation scientists look at the earth, they see the earth as being less than 6,000 years old. And some Jewish rabbis hold to that. But a great number of them, and especially the greater ones, hold to a number in the billions. Well, this idea then has to give us some understanding of what we're looking at. Our creation may be less than 6,000 years, but that doesn't mean creation itself only happened 6,000 years ago. Again, the beginning of the realm of plurality. Remember, the first letter is bet, 2. The zimzum of the divine realm is that of plurality, and it can exist that way and still exists that way. Now, I want you to go back to that small gematria for Bereshit, which is 13. I want you to understand 13 is the gematria of Ehad. And again, Ehad means one. And of Ahava, which also means love. So as we're looking at this, we both speak of the concept of unity. Love and oneness talks about unity, 2 becoming 1. I don't know if you have looked closely at the back of a dollar bill, and I gave you the half of the dollar bill. You're going to have to go create your own, grab your wallet or whatever have you. And I want you to think about this for a second. In the eagle, or just above the eagle, you find this cloud of glory, which is no accident. And in the midst of that cloud of glory, you find what we call the 13 colonies, 13 stars, arranged in an order that looks like what I call the Magen David, the Star of David. Now, the Star of David is older than Hebrew, is older than David. It goes thousands of years back further. But what I want to do is just stop here, because there's significance in what I'm looking at. And that's the fact of 13. So as we observe how 13 is the first star of David configured for us, it represents the 13 colonies. But this is what I want you to see. Here's the Magen David, the 13 stars, right here. And again, it pertains to Zim Zoom. Now remember, we started out with a dot, a point, a nekudah. From that point, it expanded. How did it expand? Well, if you're following the Jewish understanding, it expanded in the number 13, the number 37, the number 73, the number 121, and I'll get to that later. But these are the first. What do these numbers all have in common? They're all prime numbers. They're all prime numbers. The Magen David reflects these stages of creation. In the diagram that I've got, it's not below, it's now above, is the first star is the initial nekadot, the initial realm, where God is one and there is no room for anything else. It's just God. Now, if you look at the second one, you will see that the center of the dots is a little bit lighter and a little bit fuzzier around the edges, and that's on purpose. So let me get to this and show you the bigger versions. Remember, we started out with 1, 13, 37, 73, and 131. 131 is not a prime number. I'm not sure, or 121 is not a prime number. So I'm not sure how to work that out. But again, my math is limited. Indeed, the Star of David is very much a heart symbol. Doesn't look like a heart, but it's the symbol of love and unity. Now, a person needs to throw out of his or her logic the idea that God speaks a lot. Well, he doesn't speak a lot orally. It's there, but it's there in a whisper. It's there at the edge. Remember, we started out with the transformer, and as it began to move out, it reduced its volume, it reduced its energy. Same thing with the stereo system. The idea is right now, in order to hear God's voice, one needs to go into the words themselves and go into the mathematics of them. It's not as if God is far away, but rather like your father, my father, when I was growing up, he was right there. And in this case, God is even better because he never leaves us nor forsakes us, and he's always listening for us. Now, we're going to talk about some of the wonders. And again, back to where we started. In a Kabbalist, the word Bereshit is 913. It's what we would call, or what they call, a super number. And it, like a perfect diamond crystal, it has endless facets. And its meanings are numerous. Like I was telling you last week, when Harvard was first started, they had the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis there starts with Bereshit. They had over 600 volumes dealing with the word Bereshit. Bereshit itself is multifaceted. Now, like the first word, the bet is connected with what we would call the Sephra of Binah. I don't know how much you can see, but this is called the Tree of Life. It's composed of 10 Sephirot, which represents our body and our minds. When we get down through the levels, one of the things that happens is that we have what we would call the head, which is made out of Keter, which is the top part of our head, the part that's almost unknowing. And then it has wisdom and it has understanding. Now, understanding, the word for understanding is binah. And as I'm telling you here, the bet is connected to the Sefer of binah, understanding. The next Sefer is the Sefer of Chokmah, which is wisdom, which takes the point of wisdom and builds from it. So in other words, from this wisdom, we build the world. Wisdom's about getting an idea and taking that idea and transforming it. There were several times when I was a principal, I had a pad of paper laying beside the bed. And I don't know about you, but I found myself waking up at night having an idea. And if I didn't write the idea down by the morning, you can guess what happened to the idea. It was gone. And so I began to learn to write things down. I called that my wisdom. I called the writing my understanding, because from that I was able to take it back to school and put it together into something that was more understandable. Notice that Bereshit again, 913. I'm going to look at it again. How many ways have we now looked at the word Bereshit? At least 7. Bereshit is 913. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it 900 plus 13. With 13, we know it speaks about oneness. It speaks about Echad. It speaks about love. The 900 can also be written, and this time I'm changing it to a multiplication problem. 2 squared times 3 squared times 5 squared equals 900. These are the first 3 prime numbers. Do you understand God has a beginning, a location? Everything comes out of that location. Now, as we're going through this whole thing, allow me some water, please. Thank you. I feel a lot better. I don't know about you. But as we're going through this, we can do the second step of this. This seems to be a hint of the beginning of numbers from 1 to an ultimate number, whatever it happens to be. If you look at this next star, you see that the next star beyond 4 is what number? 37. Then beyond that is 73. And I want to focus on 73 right now. And again, I want to use the understanding 73 speaks of 7 plus 3. 73 speaks of 7 times 3. 73 has multiple ways of being looked at. But as we're looking at this word, what we're beginning to see, or hopefully what you're beginning to see, is the fact that the value of that word is 7 plus 3 is 10. In Hebrew, 110 can be written 1, no 0. So we begin with the understanding that what we have here is 1. It's a Hebrew way of arriving at that number. Now, the Jewish people have taken that same idea all the way through the level of 10. I walked through it. I'm telling you, it's a mighty fine chart, but the problem is it's very, very difficult for me to even understand. The next number is 121. 121 was easier for me because I can take 121 and find out that it is 11 times 11 is 121. That's the value if you look at it. 11 times 11. Again, when we expand out the numbers, it ends up being 1. How do I go from here? Let me have one more thing to add. According to the Talmud, truth, which is the word we worked with, emet, is the seal of God. It contains 3 letters. an Aleph, a Mem, and a Tav. The one thing about those three letters is the fact that they all have firm bases upon which they sit. Now, they also are the first, middle, and last letter of a word, which takes me back to the idea of God was, God is, and always will be, future. Now, as I'm beginning to think about it, I also thought about the word for lie or falsehood. That word is shakar. A shin, a kaf, and a resh. Lo and behold, none of those letters have a base. None of them can stand up on their one leg. So therefore, they fall, which is exactly what will happen in the end. The sages said that the world was created with truth. That's what Bel HaTorah said. And he wrote this from Psalms 119, verse 160. The beginning of your word is truth. Now, he was speaking about God, not mine. Truth corresponds to the sixth of the Sephirot of Yesod. Yesod is the foundation, our foundation. Our foundation as God's has to be truth. When we look at the beginning of Genesis, we are looking into the idea of what the world was intended to be and what the world is going to be when we finish making it. Because you see, at the end of days, we move into another class of time when things begin to change and we begin to make. What was it? November 6th, we had an election. President Trump was reelected. And as we went along, we began to watch, or I began to watch, maybe you haven't paid much attention to it. I began to watch how people reacted to that. How people were no longer immediately calling him a liar, but they began to show up on his side. Because you see, I think he was speaking truth all along, but they were hearing on the opposite side, shakar. As we go through this period of time, we're going to find that there's going to be more emet and more shakar. But the shakar will become more and more noticeable because it sits on one leg. We will get to the point in the age to come when there will be a new beginning, a new understanding, new wisdom. All of this will be different. Again, in the new world, there may be a new Torah, a Torah built on mathematics that you and I will then, because we are going to be in that new world, will have a new mind for it and a new understanding or the ability to understand things differently. And God can create a new Torah out of the same one, permutate the letters, or just simply allow them to be. And we can have an eternal Bible study, learning what we need to learn, as well as doing what we need to do. Yeah, I've been on here 45 minutes talking and croaking. Anybody have anything they'd like to say or suggest other than the fact that you were fantastic, that you were wonderful, that you were the nicest guy that I've ever met? Anybody have anything they want to share?